best to speak loud and into the microphone. This is Nathan, Analysis in Chains, and I'm on the road. I'm traveling with my trusty travel computer. The microphone is not the best, but we're going to do what we can. Hi, Neal. How's it going?
Hey Nathan, I'm good. If that's really Nathan, because you sound like a completely different person. It's like your accent has changed. Maybe it's your new Silicon Valley accent, or maybe it's the
Just woke
microphone.
up.
I don't know. We'll find out.
At least you can hear me. That's a good start. Hello? Can you hear me?
I can hear you perfectly.
Oh, wonderful. So, we don't have a lot of time today, but because I am on the road and because we're recording at a different time of day than we normally do. But we wanted to talk a little bit about, have you heard, Neal, about the Korea banning ICOs?
Yeah, this is actually quite big news. I guess any country banning any form of cryptocurrency is big news. But this is a little bit more interesting because a lot of the banning that was happening was from, I guess, China. And so everyone thought it was more isolated. But now that it's creeping into South Korea, it does create some anxiety because with South Korea, they're very enthusiastic about Ethereum and ICOs. And the risk could be, well, if South Korea is now banning these type of things, will they ban Bitcoin? And will Japan follow suit? Because at the moment, they're the country that's really propping up Bitcoin prices.
It's interesting to me whenever I see something about the banning of ICOs because it really feels like a temporary measure. You know, like you hear about China banning an ICO and then they unban it, or they ban Bitcoin and then they unban it, or they ban it and then they change their minds right before an election, or something to that effect. But we haven't seen anything with Korea before, so I'm
Yeah,
not sure what to expect.
yeah, I think that's a very good point. Again, I think we have to look at the bigger picture of what's happening, and we've known that South Korea have been very enthusiastic about cryptocurrencies, particularly Ethereum. And and one thing we didn't say in the past was that this was down to some internal issues that a lot of South Koreans were looking for opportunities to invest in something because a lot of the financial tools in South Korea were not returning much in terms of ROI. So a lot of people saw cryptocurrencies as a big opportunity for that. So when so much money floods into Ethereum and cryptocurrencies, naturally the local government would get a bit anxious and it would want to try and rein this in and try and control it to some extent, similar to China. So it is interesting. In a way, it's not surprising. But at the same time, if you look at Japan, which has actually embraced Bitcoin, maybe, I think we're expecting South Korea to possibly go down that route because it's more democratic like Japan, whereas China has a more of a communist system. So the fact it's going down the ban route is very, very interesting. And but I'm very curious if it's going to be a long-term thing with ICOs, or is this, as you said, more of a short-term to try and understand what's going on?
When I think about the implications of something like an ICO ban, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is, okay, how will this affect the Bitcoin price? And what we saw was a bit of a dip, but it didn't last. Like the Bitcoin price is still holding. So my first thought is that, well, I guess if you're just banning new token sales, it doesn't stop people from investing in Bitcoin and investing in Ethereum and keeping their money there as a investment, a vehicle, right? Because there are a lot of already existing cryptocurrencies out there. So this might only be sort of the first step that's at issue.
Potentially, yeah. Like, well, one thing we need to, I guess, keep in mind is that certain countries kind of favor certain cryptocurrencies. And Japan at the moment, I think, makes up for more than 50% of volume in Bitcoin. And we've seen in recent weeks Bitcoin recover from its lows and it's been increasing nearly every day now. But Ethereum has been flat for a very, very long time. So while Bitcoin is increasing, because there's still a lot more interest in Bitcoin, Ethereum seems to have flattened out, because when you have less ICOs, Ethereum is quite tied to the ICO world, because a lot of Ethereum will be used to help generate tokens in a lot of these ICO companies, or a lot of these ICOs depend on Ethereum tokens and would want to use smart contracts, for example. So we've seen Ethereum just level off, and it's going to be very interesting to see, can it recover, or or could we have actually reached peak ICO? Because of all these bans, we could see less people want to have an ICO, because they're worried that, hey, maybe if we were to plan one today and we do in 2 months, maybe there will be no ICO market left. And so we could see Ethereum drop because there could be less ICOs, but we could see Bitcoin increase because people are thinking, well, this is the more sustainable investment. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens now over the next few weeks.
Yeah. For any of our listeners who might not be familiar with the ICO process, it's when these token sales happen, a lot of people code their own tokens using Ethereum, using the Ethereum network, because the Ethereum tokens can be used natively on that network, but they also have a programming layer so that you can code your own token, but then to trade the tokens, you would pay the fees using Ethereum. So this would be why this would be why the Ethereum value is tied to the number of new ICOs that happen. So yeah, I guess that makes sense what you're saying, Neal, that it will be interesting to see what happens to the Ethereum market and whether this sticks and whether this spreads.
Yeah, like one thing I have been looking at, Nathan, is the amount raised per month for ICOs. And so we saw this huge peak in July. Like it went from, say, just less than 100 million in April to more than 600 million raised in July. That's huge. That's a huge amount. But we see this huge pullback to 250 million in August, because a lot of anxieties were created when they hit that peak, because we saw China there was talk of China introducing bans. SEC drew a line in the sand in terms of ICOs and cryptocurrency investments. And then we saw this increase in September, just below 400 million. So it does seem as if the peak in terms of investment in ICOs may have actually passed. And because of this more recent banning of ICOs in China and South Korea, possibly the peak has passed. And now that we could start to see a continuing decline in investments in ICO. And so when we see tactics like trying to get Paris Hilton to endorse a cryptocurrency, or Floyd Mayweather do the same, it does suggest that people are possibly scraping the barrel, trying to get the last of the ICO world, the last of the ICO investments out there. And so my prediction is that this whole ICO boom is going to slowly deflate now over the next few months, because there's so many cryptocurrencies out there that have covered nearly every possible idea imaginable with cryptos, that so this whole thing could come to an end.
One thing that comes to mind is that you called this back in June, before we started our first podcast. We were talking about this, and I think in one of our earliest episodes we actually mentioned this, that that you predicted that the number of ICOs would peak around September, because you saw, I believe it was Mark Cuban was doing his ICO, and you said, that's going to be the peak hype, and then afterwards it's totally going to recede, and we have actually seen that.
Yeah. Well, to be honest, I made a prediction just based on following bubbles in the past, and it's always a similar pattern. When you have it become more mainstream, And when you have people getting involved that have no idea about what's happening and they get excited, that's usually a sign that things are really overheating. And so as soon as I saw Paris Hilton get involved, that was like a concern for me in terms of, okay, we're really are getting far beyond ICOs in terms of how seriously we can really take them. And obviously it's going to generate so much interest from lawmakers around the world that it was just inevitable that there was going to be a lot of crackdown on laws and regulations. But then we also start to hear more of the corrupt nature of ICOs. Many people have used it as an opportunity to make money. So it's only natural that when it's easy to make money, you have lots of opportunists who abuse the system, and therefore laws will come in to crack down to protect local investors, because a lot of governments would want to do that. Like, many people see governments as a force of evil trying to suppress this opportunity to be a free investor. But the thing is, governments do have an obligation to protect people from being robbed or robbed of their hard-earned cash. So it was inevitable. But the thing is about the ICO, I guess, tool to raise capital is very, very interesting. So it's going to be very intriguing to see how it evolves, because obviously people are interested in this. Crypto has a huge potential, and if governments had any foresight or really understanding of what's going on, they would try to maybe find a way to create a healthy environment for ICOs in the future.
Yeah, and we're already seeing that happen with Canada. They should be coming out. I remember it was October, sometime this month, with a crypto strategy. Australia working on their own crypto token network. So, you're completely right that it is a wild west right now, and there is a term. There is a term for what has been going on with these garbage ICOs. They are called shitcoins. and the reality is that most people who are investing don't have time to go through all of the different projects, read the white papers, see exactly what's backing them up, and be sure that what people write in their white paper is actually what they're doing. And they have to trust, in a sense. And which is sort of weird, because this whole ICO market and this whole thing started with Bitcoin, where the idea was a trustless system, where you're relying on the code. And that's fine as long as the code is open source and that everybody understands how to read the code and to say, okay, well, this is how the algorithm works, and we don't need to trust each other. We can trust the code that we all can read. But when you get people who are just coming with money and who are excited about the new technology, do they have time to read the code?
Yeah.
Do they even have time to read the white paper?
Yeah, I think you just made an amazing point there, because one of the big appealing factors of crypto is trust, and ICOs does risk eroding that trust, because it is very difficult for a lot of people to really understand the technology in a white paper that's described and really understand, is this an investment opportunity. And so I have read and heard people say that this whole ICO bubble is actually bad for crypto, because it kind of loses people's faith and trust in the whole cryptocurrency market. And so, like, personally, like, I hope this whole ICO boom deflates quickly, and there is some regulation in place to help develop that trust again. Because if we go back to the dot-com bubble, and this is like what people compare to a lot of the time, is that when the dot-com bubble happened, people lost faith in the potential of the internet. People lost so much money. So many financial institutions were brought down. And so it's best that this whole thing deflates and doesn't take down any financial institution. Because if it deflates and people move on and there's a new, ecosystem for ICOs to develop in, that would mean while it matures, people are a lot more confident in its ability to, derive value. And therefore the trust will develop as well. So yeah, going back to your point, This, if cryptocurrencies are not taken care of, and if the trust erodes over time, well, then there will be no cryptocurrency markets in the future, and the potential will not be realized.
Yeah, I have very little worry that the whole thing will deflate. I think it's more of a concern of the time frame that we're looking at. How long until the trust recovers, right, after a bubble? Because it's sort of like the internet. The internet was never going to stop. It was never going to be no more internet. Okay, we're done. The question was only how long until more viable business models get started. And it's the same with Bitcoin and other blockchain projects. I mean, it has such potential to completely change incentive structures, how companies interact, how people interact, how countries interact, and everybody sees that potential. The only thing is that 99% of the ICOs out there are garbage, and and it's true, and that's going to change as regulation comes in, as the big companies come in, and as we get trusted people who are reading through the white papers for us and looking at the technologies behind it, and commenting and saying, okay, well, this one looks more trustworthy, this one doesn't, and it's people sifting through the information who have the knowledge, who we are able to trust.
I think what you just outlined would be fantastic. But my fear is, or what I'm curious about, how long will it take to develop that sort of infrastructure? Like, is it 5 years away, 10 years away? Because I think the longer it could take to set up, the more it could compromise the whole ICO world. The sooner it happens, the better. But if it takes too long, the opportunity could be missed. So, do you think those type of systems and checks and balances could be introduced in the next year or in the next 2 years?
It's hard to pin down. I think there are a lot that, because it's a bubble, there are a lot of people competing, right? There are a lot of people that are coming into the market who are trying to be that trusted voice, and a lot of them are in more trustable institutions like banks, who are regulated. And I think when you're talking about blockchain, it's an exponential technology. It's the sort of thing that is slow to start, and we don't see it everywhere, and then you're going to hit an inflection point and boom, it's going to be everywhere. So that's why it's sort of hard to pin down an exact date, because it's not like a linearly growing technology where it's going to take 6 months or 12 months or 24 months and you're hitting various milestones. It's much harder to predict. It'll be more like the adoption of smartphones, where nobody has them, and then except the elite few, and then overnight everyone has them.
So, one institution or industry I like to compare to when it comes to regulation is social media. Social media now has been around for quite many years. I think it's been like 10, 15 years. We've now had like Facebook, Twitter, and the likes, and yet the regulation has been very, very slow. And right now we're at this very difficult period in trust in social media. And yet there are no regulations. And so, I kind of feel like the longer there are no regulations, the worse it's going to get for social media. And what we now see is that this sort of backlash towards social media, people are losing their faith in it. And when I go on Facebook now, I feel like it's just garbage. Like I flick through the news feed, and it's mostly sponsored ads, and it's all of these videos. It's actually hard to see any statements of purity or thoughtful comments from my friends I used to see in the past. I used to have these conversations on a few comments on someone's wall in the past, because it'd be very intellectually stimulating conversation. But now all I see is just like mindless rubbish. And so, and what we now see, we see a lot of hate speech and controversial thing coming into social media, and nothing being done about it. So when it comes to crypto, it's like, on one hand, I like the fact there is not a lot of regulation, but at the same time, I feel there has to be some amount to protect it. But when I look at social media and see how slow the world has been to take care of it and nurture it and develop into something good, it's now too late. The time has passed. And I often worry, could this be the same with crypto? Could it be that we could see 2-3 years when everyone is loving it, and then everything's going great, and all of a sudden it just goes wrong fast, and then everyone just rejects it?
You know why I doubt it? Because social media is not hitting the financial industry, right? Like anything that touches the financial industry gets, the ban hammer coming down super duper fast, because a lot of people who are powerful have a lot to lose. Whereas with social media, people didn't really see the power of it until the 2016 American election. So, where it got weaponized. So I think now we're going to start seeing regulation coming into Facebook, the same as public broadcast television, because people are now seeing the power of it. But people have anticipated the power of blockchain just because it's touching on finance. So
yeah, I think that's an excellent point. The fact that it touches finance would make lawmakers a lot more sensitive to it. Yeah, I think that's a great point.
Yeah. Okay, so let's wrap up. Neal, a couple of quick news points. I'm going to be making a Slack group within the next week or two, as soon as I can find the time. So we've been telling everybody to write us at info@analysisandchains.com, and that's been really good. But we're thinking to better engage with our listeners, we're going to make a Slack group, and that'll give us a chance to discuss the topics on the show, to see what to do with our nutshells, and I think that'll be good. So look for that in the coming weeks. We had wanted to talk a little bit about Bitcoin Gold. I think we're going to save that till next week, because that's going to be coming up. Bitcoin Gold is the upcoming hard fork of Bitcoin, so there's some interesting aspects to that. So let's try and do that for Monday, maybe. And then this Friday, we're going to have an interview with who is it, Neal?
Aglos. Aglos from IOHK. So he will talk about his theories on proof of stake.
Yeah. So Neal had a chance to interview Aglos a couple of weeks ago, and that will be on Friday. Now, what we don't have, I don't actually have good editing tools from while I'm traveling, so I won't be able to put together a cool promo reel like I did for Radoslav or for Sergei Nazarov. So boom, 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 boom. Tune in to Aglos. That's your promo reel. That's all I can do.
Stuff.
Yeah. This is high production quality right here. All right, guys. Thank you very much for tuning in, and we'll see you on Friday. You can imagine my voice telling you thank you for tuning in over this music. That's been an